wife is calling me. Give me a second.
No. No.
All right. We're good to go.
I don't know. Are we?
I don't know yet, actually.
Leroy Jenkins.
What's going on? It's Toolbox here, your average blue-collar tamer, and we're back again with my boy JJ. We're going to be doing another video talking about the do's and don'ts for playing against a certain deck. In today's video, I'm not very happy about making this because we're going to be talking about Greymon and those style of decks because there's a whole bunch of avenues. So yeah, you want to say hi?
I can say hi. I'm back. Can't get rid of me that easily.
No, he's
Another
here
round.
forever
Forever
and ever and ever.
and ever.
How do you want to start this? So pretty much like the thing with Greymon, there is a whole bunch of avenues they can run because there's so much support with this deck and the style of deck that like no matter what way you want to play, if you're an aggressive player, you're a control player, there's a Greymon style deck for you.
But some of my friends like to joke and call this the Greymon trading card game instead of what it actually is. I would say there's like you said, there's different ways it can branch out, but there's some things that are generally the same for all the Greymons, and kind of like in our Belf video, just some like standard things you should always check for is like everybody assumes when they're playing against Greymon that like that Digimon has blocker and then X amount of protections from like being deleted or bounced. But played a lot of War Greymon myself, it's not always the case. A lot of times you build this weird non-perfect stack because you just kind of have to start building your stack or you're going to lose the game. Sometimes it doesn't have protections. Sometimes it has like 0 DP boosts. Generally, I play War Greymon, so generally half the time I don't have blocker unless I magically find one of my ties, which happens much less than I would like it to. So just being cognizant of like the board state of if this Greymon has protection or not, and if it has blocker, or in Black War Greymon's case, redirection, because those conditions aren't always filled. Like people assume they are, but they're not as easy as people like to complain about it on the internet.
Yeah, I know for me, like when I play the deck, because things I've noticed that like half the time, it's very few times that I actually get the stack that is like what people think the deck always does. Like for me, like half the time you're just like, well, I got to sacrifice a little bit here. I've had so many times where, you do the big play where you go into the metal gray, you go to metal gray X, you played a tamer, you're doing all this stuff that feels like it's good, and then you swing into security and hit something bigger than you because you just compromise on getting the DP boost because you're trying to do what the deck's good at getting it more security attack and all this. So it's definitely one of those decks. It's like when it works really well. But a lot of the times you kind of have to be like, I'm sacrificing a little bit on this. Like, this could go either way. And you have to, like you were saying, you have to do something or you're just going to lose. I guess, like, a good strategy for this deck is if you can kind of force the player to kind of maybe come out early or, like, do the combo before it's fully ready, that adds more opportunity for the stack to get deleted, or you might rush them enough to where they have to sacrifice on, okay, I can't get as much protection as I normally would because they're going at me. I gotta fight back a little bit here. I can't just hide and raising the whole game.
Now, the aggression, I mean, Greymon has some of the best consistency cards and searchers like Agumon X, all that kind of stuff. But it's still at the end of the day, it's a red deck, and red decks just inherently are not as consistent as you think they would be all the time. So if you can be faster than it and force them into some odd plays, it's very beneficial to you. And then the other thing to note too is a lot of people forget is that new Metal Greymon, when an attack target is switched, you can get to play a red or black tamer with play cost 4 or less. That is all turns. So if that thing has blocker and you swing, the Greymon player gets a free tamer. A lot of people forget that it's all turns. So don't forget that.
Yeah, because I remember like when that set came out and it gave you all the support with like the new Agumon that searches for Greymons, Omnimon, and a tie. That like for me, I'm so used to red decks being like all the effects are only on your turn, I kind of like glazed over the fact that that 1000 DP is all turns. And I don't know if I was like the only one who did that. Like when I was just looked at the card at like first initial looking at it, I was like, oh, that has to be just on my turn. I get that plus 1000. I don't know. For me, I did that and I was like, oh, it's an all turns thing, which is just kind of weird for red decks having all turns effects.
It's a little broken. Like that, the Tamer tie DP boost. I will say it might be like a pseudo hot take, but I think that Greymon that lets you play a tie, that red black Greymon, I actually don't think it's that good. I think the EX1 Greymon that lets you play a 3-cost tie when attacking is like so much better as a Greymon player.
I see the appeal of that card because it has that. If you don't have a tie, you get to play one out for free, and that feels really cool. Getting paying 2 memory and getting a memory tamer, but like most of the time, like after you have a tie out on field, that effects is pointless, and then you're just evolving for 2 when there's other Greymon cards that I feel like have more value, like either like you said the EX1 letting you playing out ties for free, like 3-cost ties or less, and also just having the BT5 Greymon that gains you a memory if it has an Agumon in the source. Like for me, getting a 1-cost Eva that also gives you plus 2000 DP on your turn feels really good.
Yeah, I mean that and Security Greymon are some of my favorite. Security Greymon, that card's got reprinted 3 times and it's still like $5 a piece. The other thing that all Greymons are weak to, and I'll leave you to discuss this because you're much of more of a green player than I am, is they have no protection from battle or being suspended and attacked over. So if you have the ability, remember the grandest craze at nationals last year? Green is the way. If you suspend them and attack over them, or Greymon raid into them, they have no protection from that.
One thing I've noticed is like the Greymon thing is really good at preventing deletion, but there's a couple things it doesn't prevent against. Like you would know this one, the Chaos Degradation, that isn't applied to that. So that's a card that easily can, even if they have the perfect stack, everything they need, that card just doesn't care. It still will do what it wants to do. And then also with going back to the green conversation, like the Garurumon line, that does have protection against battle. If you're able to suspend and also attack over any of the Greymons, that just stops what they're doing. And a lot of times, Greymon decks are kind of like a single stack most of the time. So doing that really sets them back a lot because they might be able to do their big turn, do all their checks, reboot, they have blocker, all this stuff. But if you're able to suspend them, blocking doesn't matter when it's suspended. So that effect is like null and void pretty much.
Or redirecting, like Black War Greymon's effect to be able to redirect. When an opponent's Digimon with the highest DP attacks, you can redirect the attack to this Digimon. It's cool. I'm already attacking you anyway. Go ahead and redirect me to you.
Yeah.
You're still gonna die. Just to piggyback off of Chaos Degradation. Like one of the more interesting matchups is the Hunters versus the Greymon because Hades Force is the thing and really, really powerful card in any Greymon deck. The fact that you can just wipe out 12 Tamers for 7 or 5 cost, or sorry, 12 costs worth of Tamers, like 4 Tamers, and then attack for 5 or 7 memory is kind of ridiculous. But the Hunter's Tuck effect from Arrestor, I can never say it right, Superior mode.
Arrestor Dramon?
It's so hard to say.
Yeah,
And I've only had one beer.
It is a tongue tie for sure.
But that Tuck effect also doesn't care about the Greymon protections. So, I mean, I know you need 3 different colored tamers to tuck a level 6, and it's like, oh, do they have Hades Force? But I mean, again, it goes back to like paying attention to the matchup. There's so many searches with Agumons and memory boosts or anything like that that can't grab Hades Force. So at most, I feel like Hades Force is a 3 of, usually a 2 of, depending on the meta, in my opinion. So if you see one get bottom decked from a search, you gotta feel like a little more comfortable. Or if they've played one early game because they're in a weird spot, and then you see one get bottom decked on a search, I'd feel pretty comfortable about bringing my tamers out and working on that strategy if I'm a hunter's deck or something like that. But that, I mean, that's crucial to any tamer reliant deck, like even Alt Force, if anybody still plays that deck.
You know, if you wipe their board or you're able to get rid of their big stack, their Hades Force, even if they have it in hand, your tamers are safe because it has to. That card only works when you have a Greymon on field.
Well, and a lesson for everyone that I had to learn the hard way is Hades Force specifically says only Greymon in name. So if they go into an Omnimon and they don't kill you, Omnimon does not count towards the requirement for Hades Force. So if for some reason, I know I've done it once. I didn't have any protections on my stack, and I went into Blitz Omnimon to clear security. Because I went into Raid War Greymon that same turn, I had a tie in the field. I had blocker. I rebooted, and I was like a 17k with blocker, and they had no security, and I felt really great. And then I looked in my hand and I read Hades Force, and I think I was playing against Hunters, and I read it and I felt sad because they had like 4 tamers. They did whatever they wanted to do, and I had no follow up the next turn because I had an Omnimon on the field and I just came out of racing, and I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna die next turn to Hunters because I have 1 blocker.
Most of the time, it's Greymon in name and Omnimon. Like it's kind of most of the time have been that way. But I guess Hades Force was more dedicated towards the Black War Greymon line, which I don't think Black War Greymon goes into an Omnimon, like in the show or whatever in the lore.
That card, I mean, that card's already so powerful. Like, God, that and the blocker, the black tie, the 3 cost, I think made like any Greymon deck forever viable.
Yeah, because before the only way you could get your stack to have blocker was having that Greymon that had the blocker as inheritable if you have a red Digimon in play. And that was
that was a black level 4, so then you had to tailor your whole deck around being able to evolve through the black level 4, in which for the War Greymon, the aggressive side, it never really was made any sense. Now for like Black War Greymon, it's control, a lot of board control, a lot of swinging, and just trashing security on unsuspend and deleting Digimon. But for War Greymon I don't think was ever really viable until those 2 cards were printed.
And also, like, when that card came out, like, I think that was the first set they actually introduced dual colors, and there wasn't a lot of dual colors. Like, there was in that set, but, like, specifically for Greymon. Now, like, I think almost every metal Greymon that's come out since, except the EX4 one, has been dual colored.
I think so, yeah. I mean, if we're wrong, please feel free to yell at us in the comments. Like,
yeah, we're all for that. We love criticism.
We have children. All we get is criticism. As soon as they can talk, they tell us what's wrong.
Yeah.
But then they laugh, and I'm like, all right, you're the cutest thing in the world. Get away with whatever.
You can get away with murder.
No, not murder. No. Kids?
But tax fraud,
yeah.
Yes.
PSA. Don't murder anyone.
Yeah, don't do that.
We've covered the dads portion of the Digi-Dads now. No murder.
All right, so...
What were we talking about?
yeah. Oh, yeah, we were talking about the Greymon Card Game.
Cycles the joke around. Pro YouTuber here.
So overall, like, the generic ways to play around any Greymon deck, kind of keeping in mind on your end that sometimes they're not going to have that protection. They're not always going to have blocker. Again, capitalize when you know they don't have their blocker. So kind of the whole Greymon, the War Greymon thing of redirecting attacks and restanding is null and void on your turn at least. You know, when they have that blocker tie out, then you got to worry about it at all times. But until then, so those are things you need to kind of like look out into. We talked about like how this deck is so widespread in a way. It has any type of style you play, there's a Greymon for you. So pretty much we can break it down to if you're playing the War Greymon X Antibody, you're going for the more aggressive OTK style. And then if you're playing the Black War Greymon side of things, you're playing more of a control based. I've played Black War Greymon a decent amount, and you played OTK Greymon because you just wanted locals with it. That we'll start with the OTK. Specifically for the OTK style, what are some things you can do to play against it?
Well, hey, toot my own horn. Two locals in an online tournament. I'm 10-0 with that deck. Don't know what horseshoe I wished upon, but I am not going to complain. The two main things with the Raid War Greymon is never leave an unsuspended Digimon out. It because that's like the easiest way for Raid War Greymon to do its thing. Because you can just if you have either Security Greymon or Tie, either one of those, and you go Metal Gray X, go into Raid War Greymon, swing at the unsuspended. You have Piercing, you unsuspend, do your 2 checks, swing again, do 2 more checks, and then Blitz Omni for game. It's impressively gross. Um, but never leaving anything unsuspended out for that effect to go through. Piercing obviously doesn't work if the Digimon stays alive. So, like the Metal Garurumon has protection from battle. So if you have some way to stay alive from the battle or any sort of item like that, useful. Generally, in this meta, I think for against all Greymon, especially Red War Greymon and even Royal Knights, Sorai is such a useful card in this format. Stripping sources and then not allowing Digimon with sources to attack is hugely effective. Those are really some of the most annoying things. And just outpacing a Greymon deck with early aggression is puts the Greymon player in that weird spot where you have to raise with a less than ideal stack, and then you just become susceptible to security bombs or whatever. I lost a game last week at locals where I couldn't get my Raid War Greymon above 15k, and I just had to swing security and hope. Which I know it sounds ridiculous getting it above 15k, but that's generally your point where you effectively have jamming. And I was only right at 15k because I could only cheat out one tie. And I hit Mirage Galgamon Burst Mode, which of course is at 15k. My stack died, and then they proceeded to kill me next turn.
It's weird how like your way to counter this deck is make them attack you, but attack you at the wrong time. Like if you give them the ability to get the perfect stack, or you give them enough time to stay in raising and get exactly what they need to come out and do a lot of checks, that's not good. Not very good at all.
Yeah, and I mean the backup plan is it's much easier said than done. Is just being able to find a way through their large stack once it's out there, whether it's through like a Beelzemon style deck where you can delete a Digimon multiple times on your turn to get through all their layers of protection, or a Mirage style deck where you're being able to bounce them multiple times, or just like not being able to protect from Chaos Degradation. Shine Greymon's the big baddie of this format. I'd be remiss if I didn't say like DP reduction is something they can't stop, or Greymon can't save itself from because it's just a game mechanic. If you can get them before the ideal stack, which Shine Greymon is aggressive enough to do that, then you can just DP reduce them away.
The best way to handle blockers in this format is suspending them before they can really utilize the blocking. I mean, the Black War Greymon X antibody, it technically has blocker on its own, but not, because it just makes you redirect, like highest DP, isn't it highest DP? Highest DP attacks, you can redirect it to it. So if you're going to swing with your big guy, make sure it's bigger than them. And also, if it isn't, swing with your little guys. So if they don't have the blocking effect, like on their Greymon, or on the Black War Greymon, if you swing with the little guys, they can't redirect the attack. And that's kind of a way to, if you need to get checks in.
But the other thing too is Hades Force. I played a lot of Minervamon back in the day, and Hades Force's security effect kills the Digimon with the highest play cost. So if you are threatening lethal or going for game, do keep that in mind. If like Black War Greymon X anybody isn't out in the field, swing with your highest play cost first, because usually the only security bomb in Greymon decks is Hades Force.
Yeah.
And so if you swing with that high play cost first, or highest play cost first, if you hit Hades Force down the line while you're already threatening to kill them, it really doesn't matter. Oh, you've killed my Digimon that's already attacked you. Like, oh, Bloom's done 2 checks with Piercing. and I have 3 Digimon left on the field that can attack. Oh no, you Hades Force Bloom on the second check. Doesn't matter, you're dead.
And another thing that when we were talking about like worrying about security, keep in mind about X antibody because its security effect gains a memory and puts it to their hand. So
Good point.
a lot of times, like I've done it to where I digivolve, I'm at 0 and I swing, thinking I'll be able to do a little bit more on my turn before I pass turn, and that X antibody hits, and then it immediately goes back to their turn. And if they have memory tamer out, they go back to 3. It's no big deal. But that's one thing to like more or less look into and make sure you're not, if you're gonna do a lot of like you plan on doing a lot of swings in your turn, kind of make sure you at least got some extra memory, which is weird because it's hard to easier said than done to be like, oh yeah, I gotta make sure at least I have one extra. But it's very heartbreaking when you're ready to do a big attack to win game, and that X antibody shows up and it makes it past turn, and then they clap back and they win, and makes you feel like, oh, I should have had the game.
Hitting an X antibody in security when your opponent has a memory tamer, it's just one of the worst feelings in the game. It's like, it's just one memory. Oh no, you're going to 3, and all my Digimon are dead because you unsuspended and blew them up with Black War Greymon X antibody? Oh, okay.
And that's another thing to talk about with just regular Black or Greymon. If it has a red source or a black source, like red source it deletes Digimon, black source it deletes Tamers. Most of the cards now are all your level 5s. Most of the time are dual colored, so that's not really something you have to kind of keep in mind of, like when you're playing against it, because sometimes like I just assumed that he was going to delete my Tamers, and like in the past they didn't have the black source, so it actually didn't. So it was like, oh, I need to, that's something to keep in mind. But also, like, what I was getting at is, if you know that like you can look at the board state and realize like if they have a Black or Greymon in hand, it's going to come out next turn. Kind of try to set up your board to make it to where they got to decide on, do I take out the 2 Tamers, or say you have one memory tamer out and pass turn over to them just by playing another memory tamer, so that you can't kill both of them. You always will keep one. So like that's something to keep in mind when you're playing against them. Be like, okay, right now in this situation, say they got a Greymon, a level 4 and raising, and they got a memory tamer out. So they're going to be able to get into their level 5 and keep it their turn. So they'll probably pass turn with a Black or Greymon. So like in those situations, I'll be like, okay, instead of maybe digivolving, putting myself to 0, I'll just play another memory tamer out to pass turn, so then they can't get rid of both of them. But there's a lot of decks now that play tamers out for free. But if you are a tamer reliant deck and you're playing against Black or Greymon, kind of always keep in mind that it is a 6 cost total. So like playing out more tamers in a weird way to make them have to decide which ones they want to get rid of helps a lot, in the sense of like you don't want it to be like, pass turn, like in the past I've done this, pass turn with a Nokia, got to play out an Agumon, which is cool, and then they just went into a Black or Greymon, deleted the Nokia and the Agumon I just played out, and it felt sad.
That's a nice Agumon you got there. It'd be a shame if someone deleted it.
yeah, and there's been a lot of times I've been playing against Black or Greymon, and I do something, and then immediately after I did it, I'm like, it's gone. And I just know it's not going to make it, and it never does. It is interesting to think that, like, if you play either Greymon you play, like the Raid Greymon, if it changes the attack, it unsuspends, and the Black or Greymon, if it survives a battle, if it attacks something and survives, it unsuspends. So, like, both of them have that ability to be a 2-time blocker, which is kind of interesting. Like, they feel different, like, how they play and as a whole of a card. But, like, on a general standpoint, if they are a blocker, they are a 2 blocker. unless you can attack over it.
And if they have the Metal Gray X antibody that costs 1 to Digivolve into and their sources, they get that inheritive when they unsuspend. Just trash your top security. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's interesting how like Black War Greymon can, in a way, just be a defensive style deck and still take out your security. And trashing security is probably the best way to get rid of any security, just because it's nothing happens when the card goes right to the trash.
Well, they did print like I think the one yellow option card in BT13 that actually does its effect when it's trashed, which is funny.
Yeah, because they added that whole mechanic of trashing your own security, which, I mean, yellow's kind of always done that, but you get more value now.
Yeah, it's like Kent. Oh, it's the Royal Knight that looks like a horse that I always ruin his name. If you haven't noticed yet, in like the 2 videos I've done, that there are some names that I just butcher in this game, and I feel bad, so I just don't say them out loud. I can't think of anything else more like Greymon related is just, I mean, capitalize when they don't have the ideal stack. Ideally, force them into not having the ideal stack and coming out of raising. Punishing their Digimon before they get protections. And specifically against Raid War Greymon, not leaving an unsuspended Digimon. I will say though, Greymons can always tech, which is I think one of the hardest things about all the support they've gotten, is their support is so general that like you can be playing against quote unquote Black War Greymon, but there's really no drawback for them from like putting in 2 Raid War Greymons, and they can kind of catch you off guard.
Yeah, I mean,
So
that's why like Toolbox Greymon is kind of popular right now because, like you were saying, all the support is so generic. Theoretically, play 2 and 2 of all the Greymons, like level 6 line. You're kind of your way of countering anything. I mean, I recently watched a video on what were those guys' names again?
Digital Gate, shout out Digital Gate.
Yeah, I love those guys. Sorry, I forgot your name. No offense, I forget a lot of things' names. That video was so good of explaining like of all the styles of Greymon and stuff like that, but it also, they said something that kind of like hit home, I guess. Greymon can tech for anything, but they can't tech for everything. So that's one thing to like, keep in mind when you're playing against it. They may have the ways to out whatever you're doing, but you also have to keep in mind like there's a good point that they might not have it in their hand at the time. They might be doing that. They might have the techs against you, but they don't have it in hand. So don't like count yourself out as soon as you start the game, because I know a lot of players that like openly realize that like, oh, this deck counters mine so hard, like there's like I can't win. Like, and I've seen people like play that way, and I'm like, if you just played it normally, always like you want to assume they have the counters to you, but hope they don't. So playing like, if you change how you play too much and you're not doing what your deck's good at, and you're not getting the benefits of whatever deck you decide, because all decks, the reason why you pick to play them is because their style of play or what the effects are you like. You don't want to like immediately think that they have all the counters for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you kind of have to balance like furthering your strategy while also not playing into their hand. But sometimes you just have to make that decision. It's like, oh, hey, it's turn 2. They've only drawn 2 cards. Or I've seen their searches, and I know their searches didn't add this to their hand. I think they're probably at most playing 2 of it. I'm just going to further my board state and hope that they don't have the counter in the 7 cards they've seen in their deck so far.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes they do, but card games be card games. You got to take those chances, because if they don't immediately have that counter, then you've put yourself in such a better spot to handle anything else they do. I generally play aggressive decks. Like I'm mainly red and purple, and there's just sometimes in a game where you're like, I have to force you to have it, and if you have it, you have it. Like I played against Hunters in our finals at locals this last week. I think I had Memory Setter tie and 1 or 2 ties in the field, and it's like a level 5 or in raising, and I brought out, went to Raid War Greymon, killed all her Digimon on field, checked security, she brought out another tamer, and then, but she had me at 0 security, so my only chance was to wipe her board, and then I had a Hades Force in hand, and then I got rid of all but one of her tamer, so then I knew she couldn't rush to kill me the next turn, and I also had blockers, so, but with only one tamer, I knew it couldn't be bottom decked, and I knew it couldn't be killed, but I only run 2 Hades Force. And it was very early game. I mean, she had me at a 0 security in like turn 3 or 4. And so I think she played it right where it's as long as he doesn't have Hades Force, I win. And I only run 2 of it. I just got lucky enough to where I had it.
Pretty much on paper, most of the Black War Greymon or War Greymon, the level 3 to level 5 are all borderline the same. There's the same, pretty much you're playing the same group of cards. It's just the level 6 that where it varies.
I will say, if you see like security Greymon, like the level 4 security attack +1, you safely assume you're playing against a War Greymon player, because Black War Greymon never really wants to check 2 security. It's so controlly, it just kind of wants to suspend and trash security on the next turn. So I think like that's a very good indicator of if it's War Greymon. But to Ty's point, it's like the Agumons, like 10 to 12 Agumons, they're usually all the same. The Greymon X antibodies are all the same. There's some flavoring with the level 4s, like I mentioned. It's like always a 4 of Metal Greymon, because giving piercing and being able to cheat out ties when attack targets are switched is just like a no-brainer. There's some flexibility with the Metal Greymon X antibodies, whereas if you want to get more aggressive, or if you want to kind of protect yourself from shine or be more controlly. But to your point, I mean, I just named like every card in the line from 3 to 5, and I said about 2 things that would be different.
Once they get going and they're doing their things, you'll figure out very fast. But like the fact that like the Toolbox Greymon is kind of getting popular, you know, it's a little mix of both.
I just think you're really pumping the word toolbox here. I think you're really on brand. I like to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I made it. I didn't.
Yeah.
But I thought about it. I was like, I really should make a Toolbox Greymon deck because it just makes total sense.
It makes way too much sense.
It's like too much sense that like it feels wrong doing it, if that makes sense.
I mean, I'm sure you've talked about it before, Ty, but like, I want the people to know. This man literally shows up to locals with a toolbox full of Digimon cards. Like, it's not a shtick. Like, he does it. That's his deck box container.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's honestly about it. If you enjoyed the video, you found something informative, you know, give it a like. It helps us out, makes us feel like we're doing something good. Subscribe, all that fun stuff. But mainly, I just like when people comment and we can like have a discussion. So
comments, ask us questions. If there's anything, if you want to see that War Greymon list, I mean, I'd be down to show it off and have everyone at my locals now beat me because they'll see all 50 cards in my deck. But, you know, I'll do it for the people.
And one day, I'm going to win a locals. That's my goal. Hopefully.
You got to stop working doubles and show up to locals, though, to win one, buddy.
I know. I can't go unless I'm working daylight. If I'm on afternoon, I'm missing it. If I'm on midnights, I can come for a couple hours, but then I got to leave halfway through, and it feels like, oh, but I'll be really annoyed if I was on track to, like, get into the finals, and I'm like, oh, I got to go.
Sounds like car troubles to me. I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, I could just do the patented, I can't come into work today. I think I got strep throat.
Yo, Ty, you're up. It's round 3 pairings. Just shut up. What was that in the background?
Don't worry about it. The whole house is sick. Everyone cough. Just... All right. Well, we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.
See you.